Class is now in session. I'm Professor Hockey, and today we'll be discussing another Sharks player review, and this time around we've got Sharks goaltender Mackenzie Blackwood. Now, last year, the San Jose Sharks ran with a goaltending tandem of Kaapo Kähkönen and James Reimer. It was expected to be relatively average, obviously not all that great, considering Reimer had been pretty decent the year before that, but instead what the Sharks ended up getting was one of the worst goaltending tandems in the entire league, not even amongst the top 60 goalies that particular year. It was an absolute disaster and one of the major reasons for why the Sharks finished so low in the standings. Coming into this season with the Sharks' defense in front of their goalies getting noticeably worse with the departure of Erik Karlsson, the Sharks needed to improve in this particular aspect of their game if they wanted to avoid complete embarrassment this season. I mean, with the Sharks' current goalies, they still ended up last place. Had they not seen any improvement, it would have been a struggle to even hit the 10-win mark on this season. And so, with James Reimer leaving in free agency, the Sharks went on a search and ended up settling on New Jersey goaltender Mackenzie Blackwood. Blackwood had a promising start to his career with New Jersey. As the Devils were coming out of their rebuild, Mackenzie Blackwood seemed to be setting himself up to be the goaltender of the future for that team, that they were going to be transitioning from Martin Brodeur to then Corey Schneider and now over to Mackenzie Blackwood. But even though those first couple of seasons with New Jersey were actually quite solid, he really began to struggle over the next few years, primarily due to never really finding any sort of consistency in his game due to his heavy level of injuries that he would face and is really still facing even to this day. He's been a very injury-prone goaltender, and even though the Devils have been struggling to find any sort of consistent goaltending for themselves over these last couple of years, Blackwood has shown himself to be unreliable enough with that franchise that he became expendable for the Devils, and as such the Sharks were able to pick him up and hopefully get him to turn things around, as like I said, this year would have been an absolute disaster without decent enough goaltending, and Blackwood actually ends up providing that. He was pretty decent for San Jose. If we take a look at his statistics, 41 games started is actually the second most in his entire career, going back to his time with the New Jersey Devils, and it should be noted, of course, that Blackwood was sharing the net for most of this season with Kaapo Kähkönen, and there were still some injuries here scattered around for Blackwood, so he played a good chunk of games, technically half of the season he started for the San Jose Sharks. 10 wins is obviously not going to look particularly good here. 41 start with 10 wins. That means he's winning less than a quarter of the games that he's actually starting. But wins are very much a team-slanted stat. A goaltender, it's very difficult for them to actually single-handedly win more than a couple of games each season for their particular team. You need solid defense in front. You need solid offense. Neither of the things that the Sharks actually had going for them. So 10 wins, 41 games, not really his fault. Then if we take a look at his goaltending statistics here, a 3.45 goals against average and a .899 save percentage. These are not the types of statistics that jump off the page, but one thing that I do want to talk about is actually the save percentage here. A .899, like I said, not particularly good on paper, but there has been a general trend over these last few years in the NHL where scoring has just increased. If we take a look 10 years ago at the 13-14 season, the Art Ross Trophy winner was Sidney Crosby at 104 points, and that was viewed as a huge performance by one of the best players in the league, if not the best player in the league at that time. No other player in that particular season even hit the 100-point mark, and there weren't even a ton of point-per-game players in general. At that time, it was only the elite of the elite talent who could actually get more than 82 points in 82 games. This year, however, these days, things are a bit more lenient. There have been many changes to the rules and regulations of the game when it comes to just more penalties being taken and goaltenders having to deal with less padding and things of this nature that has led to the general increase of scoring, where now the Art Ross winner this season was Nikita Kucherov at 144 points, which is 40 points more than Crosby won with 10 years ago, and there were over 30 players who were at least a point per game this season. And so if scoring is way up, it obviously leads to the fact that goaltending statistics are going to be way down. Again, taking a look at 10 years ago, you would consider your goaltender to be pretty good, a good enough goaltender to carry you through the playoffs if they managed to hold up a save percentage of at least 920. 10 years ago, 17 goalies in the league had a 920 save percentage or higher. This year, however, there were only 2 goalies who managed to actually have a .920 save percentage or more, and only one of them was actually a starter this year, which was Connor Hellebuck with the Winnipeg Jets. Every other starting goaltender in the league was below this. Igor Shesterkin with the New York Rangers, who is widely considered to be one of, if not the best goaltenders in the league, maintained just a .913 save percentage this past season. It is very difficult when scoring is so high to actually keep your goaltending stats, which are definitely also somewhat more team-based, rather high. So while before a .920 would be considered the baseline for being a good goaltender, these days it's closer to about a .910, which means the average save percentage for a goalie is closer to like .905, .904, at which point Blackwood only comes himself a few points behind that average mark. And that can be pretty much entirely based on the fact that the Sharks' defense in front of Blackwood was so horrific and one of the worst in the entire league, if not the worst in the entire league, that it is even the best of the best goaltenders would see their average save percentage fall by a few points. If we move on to the next stat here, we have goals saved above expected. Now, it should be noted this is much more of a subjective stat than the others. The other 2 stats, goals against average, save percentage, purely subjective as they are completely math-based. Save percentage is simply just the amount of saves you've made based on the amount of shots you have faced, while goals saved above expected has to be evaluated by either a specific person or some sort of computer program to really evaluate what each shot you face and the expected value of that particular shot. So while this is definitely a somewhat flawed stat, it is still a decent look at how a goaltender has done on average, and more entirely based on themselves compared to the team in front of them. And Blackwood is in the positives here, not by much, just a plus 2.4, but that does mean he has been 2.4 goals saved above the expected amount that he should have, which means if the Sharks had been an average team, Blackwood definitely would have been good enough to bring them at least to like a wild card spot or fighting for that particular position. It was more so the players in front of Blackwood who really let him down. And so as we move into the following season and the years after that, the major question becomes here for Blackwood is, can he be the Sharks starting goalie of the future? And the question, or the answer to that, is somewhat unclear, because sometimes when you are on this really bad team, the expectations are rather low for yourself, and so you don't really feel that immense amount of pressure to have to perform at a high level. At the same time, being on such a bad team does hit a goaltender somewhat harder than it might hit some other players. You know, if you're Kyle Burrows, yes, you know you're playing badly and you're losing a lot of games, but you yourself don't feel as individually responsible as a goaltender might feel. So it's kind of difficult to predict where Blackwood's stats can go. One thing that is nice to know is that we do know Blackwood is capable of being a very good NHL goaltender. That's something that he showed at the beginning of his career, and he's certainly not over the hill in terms of age, since he's still considered to be on the good side of 30 years old. So perhaps in 2 to 3 years, Blackwood could very well be the guy leading the San Jose Sharks back into a playoff push at some point, but it's definitely somewhat difficult to predict. Right now, the Sharks' need for a goaltender is not super pressing, but for this issue to be solved in 4 to 5 years' time, I don't know if Blackwood is that type of guy. We shall see. But in terms of how this season has gone, Blackwood was pretty good. He outperformed expectations by a decent bit, considering they were not particularly high for him, and as such, he gets the grade of a B+. Class dismissed.